Nice.
Right. So I think, one of the things, and I'm going to recap a little bit here, just, for the sake of the recording, the idea that we could have, we're considering two sites, and there's a lot of ways that we can consider the relationship between the two sites, right? One is this kind of digital exchange that we're doing, like we're kind of performing right now. And then another way to think about this exchange is something that kind of manifests through that digital exchange. And then the kind of third way that we're talking about this is like, and this might exist on both ends of that cycle, is a material like manifestation that kind of really points back to that invisible circuitry, right? Kind of poetic circuitry. So the idea that we could, we live on a planet, we have to meet, during certain times. And right now for me, it's 9 a.m. For you, it's 6 p.m, right? Like that in order to meet at the same time, we're necessarily at different times because of our orientation on the planet, because of our planet's orientation in the sun, right? So there's like a material difference. There's a spatial temporal difference. And then there's also the kind of cultural differences, or kind of, the way that cultural differences manifest in our kind of common objects. So you were just kind of talking about this. Maybe you can,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like, will you kind of recap that again, like the way that objects get represented in media? And so that kind of common out, like you have to figure out what certain common objects are. If you're like, what you were just explaining in the cartoon, will you just repeat that?
Yeah, and also what it means in one direction. I mean, what it means if I ask you to extract something from the reality in California, what it means for me to receive it, because I already have an experience of the common forms, of the public forms, or even like the design. But on the contrary, if I extract something here, it won't say the same for you, because you don't have really like already an experience of like letterboxes or taxis, or why in Switzerland really little kids, when you ask them what color is a taxi, they answer yellow. We don't have yellow cabs here. And even in America, there is only one city where the cabs are yellow, So if I, for example, ask you to 3D scan, doesn't matter what, but a detail in the street, I will kind of have kind of private relation to this detail already. This is, that could be an interesting direction on my part, but I think it's also interesting to develop something connected in both directions. Not only I ask you this, you ask me that.
Yeah, but I think it doesn't necessarily, need to be symmetrical, because that, as you just suggest, like the relationship isn't necessarily symmetrical. California exports through Hollywood a lot of kind of visual media, through Silicon Valley a lot of infrastructural media, right? So there is kind of a not a hierarchical necessarily, but an asymmetrical relationship there, right? And I think that might be interesting to explore that asymmetry. So it could be, a sampling. We consider that, we kind of piggyback on that existing circuit, and the flows of information in that circuit, and so we can kind of play around with that a little bit.
Yeah, and also the power of storytelling, and how you can inject a story into an object. I mean, we don't have necessarily to make things for real. For example, if I ask you to 3D scan that detail, or that building, or that doesn't matter what, I think it's interesting also to work with, for example, the 3D scan, but not necessarily to use it, but also to take it as a material to work on.
I mean, as you're saying that, it starts making me think about like QR code, like augmented reality and ways that we can place virtual objects in space. So that's another thing that we could think about. I don't know if you've played much with it, but there's a couple different ways we could think about using like image triggers. I have a pipeline that I use with my students. It's all web-based, so it doesn't need a special app. You just like, you know, as long as somebody goes to a website, it can trigger. And it, you know, it's not quite as seamless as some of the apps in terms of like the image trigger itself needs to be fairly simplified, but like those simplified forms can be, you know, illustrative. They don't necessarily need to be kind of the QR code.
Of course. And let me see just the notes we took.
So it could trigger both these objects, but also like audio or, you know, like other events, because it's, you know, it's just JavaScript. So
I think it could be interesting to work on how you, let me think. For example, in the doc, I talk about the photographic work of Tyrone Simon and Trevor Paglen. You know that geographically found the places where you can see these wires, underwater wires that connect Europe and America for like secret connections between NSA and power structures. But I thought it was interesting to how when you just see the photographs of like cables, you know, wires, you just project yourself into these photographs and you make the story by yourself, you know. You just see it and you imagine all the data, the datas and the signals that just go through it per minute, or you know. And I think I like just the simplicity of result, and you just give the job to the audience, you know, you just have to project yourself into the photograph, because I say that this photograph shows a secret place where you can see the wire, you know what I mean? I like the fact that you can basically show anything, and you just give like a keyword or just an input, and then the people just project themselves. And I think it could be like a very powerful tool for this connection between you and me, you know, because as you said before, we are so distant, and the relation we have is only through these signals, you know. So when you talk before about these holes you do in the ground, like extracting something and you let a hole on the ground, I mean, I could just basically make my own extractions and make a story with that, you know. I don't know how, but the story can be really important, not necessarily the sculpture or and I mean, I say that because you talk about sound or app or websites. I mean, that could be really interesting to talk with, maybe connected sound between you and me, or between both places.
I mean, I think what you're starting to kind of circle around, I think, is this idea of that kind of like speculative forensics. So I don't know if you know forensic architecture. Like working and like kind of doing real world things, right? But like inserting themselves into the kind of narratives of like law, you know, inserting the inserting the project into these systems that we take for granted as givens, you know, but are also, you know, narratives that are made up, right? Like made up by humans, and the relationship then between this kind of sampled material object that is the given, right? Like the cables under the ocean is the given, right? But whether or not it's actually passing data, it will look the same, right? It will be a material object and kind of look the same.
Yeah.
But it's only the kind of fantasy and the narrative that we have created, coupled with kind of like technology that allows us to enact these fantasies, that it is meaningful in any kind of way, right? So I like that idea. I like that, you know, while we think of this as very much like a digital and immaterial signal, like it's really only you know, in between me and my router, you know, but I'm still, you know, plugged into the wall, right? So that we are actually, this is signal actually is being shoved through this kind of like messy material cable under the oceans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we both have that kind of fantasy in the dematerialized, but it's also this kind of like predicated on top of this very real and very material and very geographically specific.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I remember forensic architecture exhibition, like so nice, and they talk about places in the world that you cannot really go to because of the war and the civil war, for example, Syria, and the fact that the people there that use rockets to kill the civils know that the American satellites that are used to kind of watch what is going on there, you know, has only a resolution of 1 meter by 1 meter.
Yeah.
So they use rockets that make holes in the houses that are smaller than this resolution.
Yeah.
Then the powerful nations cannot see. You know, on the images taken by the satellites, everything is perfect, but actually, for real, everything is just destroyed.
Yeah,
you know, dead.
And then that relationship back to the image, right? And you know, heterosterols, how not to be seen, and that kind of like resolution, and like talking about resolution and like what scale is, and what scale exists for.
I think something.
Oh,
I can't hear you. Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I was just saying, you know, talking about heterosterols, how not to be seen work, and that kind of the idea that like being seen, it matters, you know, if it's like who's behind the lens, or if there is a who behind the lens, right? So like images made for technology, or images made for humans, and kind of like the slipperiness between it. And then it makes me think about, you know, what's his name? Virilio, Thomas Virilio, War and Cinema, talking about the co-development of kind of like optics, but also like war machines, and the kind of relationship between Hollywood and kind of military industrial complexes.
Yeah.
There's a lot about that, like what can be seen, and like why things become invisible, right? So like resolution as both like how small can you get, but also resolution, thinking about, and Paglen talks about this a little bit in some of his lectures, right? Like the temporal resolution. So like how quickly can you see, and how dated is the image, right? Like that there's the further away, when you're trying to, you know, spy remotely on someone, the further away you get in time, the blurrier the image becomes, necessarily because you're kind of chasing a temporal thing that's kind of already happened.
Yeah. So this relation between you and me could also be like the instructions could be like, let me see, you know, like find a way to let me see, or like find a way to visually produce something that I cannot have access to just through my computer, or, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is interesting. Yeah, the spy thing, you know, like, but not with the romantic or the narrative aspect, but just like a very minimalistic just way to find, yeah, to create eyes. I mean,
Right. That's
yeah.
interesting, like, to bring up, because like it's the kind of like there's Donald Rumsfeld, who's like, you know, like had this American, but he had this famous quote. There's like the known unknowns. Oh God, what was it? The unknown unknown, something like
Yeah.
this kind of like strange, totally postmodern, almost cone, you know, like, so when you're talking about this, like, I don't know what I need to, like, how to be, like, what to see. And so like thinking about, you know, like, again, the kind of asymmetries of like cultural exportation, you know. But I'd have to think about that a little bit, but I like thinking about it.
Yeah, but yeah, not necessarily also like vision, but like sensitive surface.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be like actually like through image, but like, how can I transmit you by sensitive surface, like the place where the exhibition will take in Switzerland or in SF, you know.
Yeah.
But
Which,
then it's
like, I
like
like thinking about sensitive materials, right? Like, what does that mean? It could be like the water coming out of my tap. It could be, you know, like the, you know, the, like what sensitive, both in that it can receive information, but also that it kind of can relay information.
yeah, and can possibly also like be augmented or reduced, like the butterfly effect, or this kind of what's the name? Like this is a yeah, this was a wave, but like a radio wave from the space that we only discovered like a few years ago. And that, I mean, I have to find it.
It's so funny. I was actually just sending one of my students, we're talking about this. He had a faulty installation on his computer. I was like, that could be a cosmic ray, right? Like that.
Yeah.
They do these, like, they call it bit flip. So it just turns a 0 into a 1 or a 1 into a 0. I love thinking about that.
Yeah. What's the yeah, and this was actually just connected to an event in the history that that happened like just after the Big Bang, but we only received the wave like a few years ago, and because they had to build like all architecture that could be sensitive enough to capture this wave and to transmit it into audio sound then. And actually at the end it's just a beep, but then when you hear that and when you read just what it contains, in just this beep, you project yourself, and it's like, wow. But I have to find it. I will find it.
I found the quote from Rumsfeld. So he's talking, this is in 2002, right? Like talking about the lack of evidence in Iraq, you know. Reports say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me because, as we know, there are known knowns. There are things that we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, there are some things that we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns, the ones we don't know, we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tends to be the difficult ones.
Mm.
I mean, it's really kind of beautiful, you know,
yeah.
extracted from the moment, but it was this idea that this kind of slipperiness that we're talking about of kind of narrative projection and these kind of like the differentials that kind of forensic architecture is playing with, that he's kind of engaging this like speculative space as, you know, not necessarily a justification, but a rationale for killing a super destructive activity that kills, you know, thousands of citizens in a country far away. Anyway,
let's write it. That sounds so good, so nice. Oh yeah.
I'm gonna put it in the thing.
Dan Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And he was in kind of like very much kind of an architect of this war as Secretary of State.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking about that idea of the known and like the difference between the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that kind of unknown unknowns could be like a locating.
Yeah.
A locating gesture for us.
Yeah, for sure.
And it also kind of like speaks to that symmetry, right? Like.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting to just take this speech as a starting statement or something to just focus on.
Yeah.
I really like this. This melody of the speech. You know? I mean, when you read it, it was so nice just to on the melodic aspect. This is like already so interesting. And it contains a lot of interesting things.
Right, but also as like a response to lack of evidence, you know, and so this idea that evidence is going to be materially or like optically based, right? So this idea that you can design for lack of evidence, as you're kind of discussing, right? Like making the missile hole small enough so that a camera can't see it, or like the idea that these cosmic rays, like we have to produce the thing that can see them, right? Because we don't have access to that, right? So this idea that there's this gap between evidence as a way to describe the world in a way that we can consistently agree upon, right? Like evidence is, okay, well, we all agree on evidence. We all
Yeah.
agree on, that this thing happened. But, you know, I think one of the things that's obviously happening because of, you know, digital signals and social media and this distribution of kind of language and like distribution of narrative is that even those materially based things become slippery. You know, like they were already, right? Like we can kind of, you know, become so small we can't be seen. We can design for invisibility. We can
Yeah.
design to not exist, right?
Yeah.
They're already slippery, but then there's this also conflation of narrative, the story on top of it, right? Like maybe the cable under the ocean isn't, and this is where, you know, like the kind of conspiracy theory that's, you know, certainly
Yeah.
prevalent in
Sure.
the United States.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's happening in the same way for you or it,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and part of that has to do with the culture, right? Like cultures that are more open to kind of social interdependence, it's easier to come up with common narratives, whereas like the culture that is so like, you know, holds fast to individualism is necessarily going to create this kind of dispersal of collective consensus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And it, you know, like one of the things that I'm, you know, as we're working with these kind of virtualized objects or kind of lenses into like, let me see, you know, it's, I think we're necessarily like kind of, you know, we're kind of engaging in yeah, do we want to get closer to the truth, like to a kind of a truth? Like, are we after this truth or are we after this kind of speculation and kind of like inserting other possibilities into the
Yeah.
narrative?
Yeah. Yeah. This is also about like how we can talk. Yeah, it's like the work of Walid Beshti, you know, with these mirror squares, FedEx thing, which kind of work like forensics, you know, like, but with this problematic of like distance made by the package, you know, and that could be interesting to find just a way to kind of have this result, but through like a digital traveling, like digital distance. But I like the fact that a unique thing can contain a lot of traces, can just be a proof or an evidence itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I like, we can find some connections with what we were talking about. I don't know why I thought about him, but
No, I like that a lot. Right, like in a way that like objects are always subject to handling or you know, to preservation, but
yeah.
because they're material things, it's easier to kind of track provenance, right? Like there is evidence, but like
Yeah.
a digital signal. I mean, our digital signals do have that. We just don't have access to the metadata, right? Like
Yeah.
platforms are kind of, you know, tracking. There is like, you know, this kind of messiness and this kind of like digital signature of kind of like
Yeah.
passage, but it it just doesn't happen in the same, you know, you can't take a fingerprint because we don't have access to it, or maybe you could, but like in the same way a fingerprint isn't useful unless you have the database of
Of
fingerprints
course. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
right, like maybe it's the same way, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the tool, it's, you need the big tool to measure the cosmic wave, or
Yeah.
you need access to the database, or you need, you know, you need the passphrase or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you scrape that data? It's kind of like, you know Oliver Lyrics, or not Oliver Lyric, Oliver, He's the critical engineering ensemble. Let me see if I can.
Yeah.
Julian Oliver, critical engineering. And so he does these things where he'll like put up a balloon and kind of scrape all the open data that he can find from like Wi-Fi signals. And there's like also he floats it up, at a height and altitude, which is where, a lot of, I forget whose communication it is, but there's a certain like height, above the earth that like, these communication signals are being broadcast or kind of travel. So he's, I love that idea that like you need to get like a balloon to like go up into this kind of like orbit of signals, and then you can like literally scrape the data. I think that's such a beautiful gesture. Yeah.
Of course.
Let me see here. But it also kind of, points back to this thing that we started on, where like there is a cable under the ocean that we're communicating through. We do have to meet at these funny times so that like our daily patterns sync up, but like that as a result of the spatial relationship of the earth to the sun, and like the geometry, like that there is something at the end of the day, as different as we are kind of culturally, you're still plugged into a circuit while it might look different, right? So there might be that kind of cultural misrecognition, but like you're still, everything that we're doing actually is exercising a kind of energetic expression that ultimately came from the sun, right? Like this subsidized solar energy through coal or oil, or gas or whatever, or directly, I guess it's a little bit different when we talk about wind, but I think even that, right? Like, anyway, I'm
thinking, no, it's perfect to
I think it would be great to, one of the things I might do is just kind of like, if you don't mind sending me your lat and longitude, I can at least kind of like make a map of like where we are. So like this kind of speculative differential that we're kind of like traversing through, like CEST versus PST, like time zone. Like, that's a database way of understanding this kind of differential. But I think I'd also kind of like to see it. That might be interesting to kind of visualize.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you. If you have time, and if you have,
Yeah. I think it's, it's a part of, I think it'll be a part of this.
Go on. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Do you think there is a way to do it like on the same, like the Google Sheet? Yeah. Something that can be modified, transformed by both of us.
Yeah, maybe what I'll do is stick it into like, I haven't played with this in a while, but like, like make a Google Earth file that we can start playing with. And then it's, linked in the sheet, but then also like we can take screen grabs to record components of it, but then it's also like a collaborative site or a collaborative space.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm thinking of now too, and only because I'm like, one of the things I'm doing right now with my students, I'm teaching that summer class, but we're making an exhibit for Factory of the Sun. Hitoshi, and so like that's probably why I'm so solar focused right now and labor, but we're doing it on this platform that my student made called New Art City, and it's this like, it was made as a virtual exhibition space, but that might also be like a way for us to kind of spatialize like collaboratively, like we can upload videos or text or audio file, like sound files, but also 3D models. So that could be interesting if you would want.
That could be perfect, but to work, to go on, but also to document the thing, the evolution.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. There's a few exhibitions that might be useful to look at. One is like, in particular, is this kind of performative conference. So we have the College Art Association in the United States, which is our kind of, big academic conference. And then there's a group, the New Media Caucus, which is like the Art and Technology Caucus. And so they held this kind of exhibition, but also kind of like a performative seminar, and they put that in New York City. So that might be interesting to take a look at as a
I'll
send you the link for that. So I'll just start putting stuff in there. I'll see if I can get I have like they're all like just individual URLs, but they call them rooms. So I have like a kind of like a room that I've just been using for like demos for the students, but I'll see if they can spawn a new room for us for this project.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
And I'll invite you to my room so you can start playing around with like uploads and just see if I get a sense for it.
Yeah. Did you know the work of Lapsy Lam?
No.
Because I put it on the Google Sheet because I just like the fact that this is really like 3D scan, 3D print, and everything. But that when she 3D print the details, that it contains a lot of mistakes, and because I'm pretty sure she used like a non-professional 3D scan, maybe just like photogrammetry with the iPhone or something like that, and the objects at the end are so beautiful.
So beautiful.
Yeah. And this is so simple. That contains a lot of.
This is a way that we could like build out spatially, like it could be a site for documentation, like we're doing the New Art City thing, it could be a site for documentation, but it could also be a way to build out like a combination, like a hybrid spatialized, some whatever.
Hybrid is I like this term, and I like the fact that maybe we talk about hybrid things or trying to make it blurry, to just go through this distance and the fact that you are in USA and I am Switzerland and we talk about things, but like maybe make it blurry, make it like Oliver Larrick say, like a new version, like
I think what you're talking about when the kids are when kids watch cartoons and are kind of like reconciling mailbox versus what mailbox is like they are creating a third thing, right, which is this imagined corollary.
This hyper reality, I think I can't remember who said that. I have to make some search later. I just want to write it in the Google Doc, like hyperreality, which is this third reality that is constructed by how we represent things a lot, like I think the example I saw when I read this text was like basically like porn industry, which created an hyper reality of sexuality, is not real.
But then
never like that, but it became, because it was,
yeah, you perform it, right?
exactly.
Like
You perform it, and it still now it's represented like this, and people try to play, they learn and they play like this, so and this is, I want to find this text. This is really nice. Maybe we have to
it might be interesting to think about ways that this kind of like accumulative like reference, like what we're tending to do, I think, is like both engage in like production of our own kind of discourse, but also like footnotes through it. Maybe we can also think about ways to kind of engage the footnotes in the thing, in the kind of visual or like experiential, like whatever, someone who's not us who engages this project, whatever it turns out to be, something, a way for them to engage this too. I even think, like what you're talking about, this kind of like hyper reality, I'm re-listening to, do you know Jaron Lanier?
How you
Jaron Lanier. He coined the term virtual reality. And he's in the Bay Area, but like is kind of the closest thing California has to like a theorist, like native theorist, like who's doing technology, but is also kind of theorizing about it. So he's written a couple books. One is like called "You Are Not a Gadget." They're very much like popular crossover, meant to kind of engage the public at large. But the one I'm re-listening to right now is "Who Owns the Future," and it's kind of like tracing a history of like decisions made about the web and how we ended up where we ended up. But he's also kind of like imagining like an alternate future in it. But he's tracing the history of the way that we do links, right? And hypertext and the development of kind of like, HTML as a programming language really caught on because it was super easy to do, but like the early engineers were really kind of rooting for this two-way linking system so that every link knew what other websites were linking to it, right? So that's like a big, hard database management problem. And so HTML came about with this like one-way linking system, and like it just spread like wildfire because it was super easy and you didn't have to do the hard thing to figure out this challenge. But that like if we had two-way links, right, it would have massive ramifications for like cultural producers, right? So you could get micropayments for every time your song was played or your file was accessed. But it also would, like in relationship to that kind of Wally Bechte's packet parcel piece, like you would have this kind of like trace, of all the things that like that a link passed through, right? You could kind of that. I like thinking about that, and then also just like the way that language kind of gets embedded in these things, like hypertext as like an idea was this like super psychedelic kind of like concept originally, but now it's like the head, like it's the header for all all of our websites, HTTP, right? Like hypertext as like this kind of psychedelic concept that came out of kind of like the hippie culture in California is now this like protocol. I think that also is interesting, the way that kind of, again, like stories become protocol, and then protocol then also like there's other realities that get created from the protocol, and that in your example of the kind of like porn becoming like one, this kind of imagined thing, but then becoming for the newly initiated like the way that you would enact sex, right? Like that it becomes a script as well.
Exactly.
Do you know Alex Galloway at all? Alexander. He wrote a book called protocol. He's at NYU, and kind of came out of the arts. Like he had a group called the Radical Software Group. But that's an interesting one. And I think, you know, like the other one, I think I mentioned in my like early proposal was the Inca Arns, the read me, run me, execute me, thinking about code as a performable text. So there might be something in there too, as we're kind of like documenting and footnoting and the text that we're creating as like a kind of like a performance or something.
Yeah, a lot of things to work
on. So maybe what I can do moving forward, my kind of action item would be like to get the room for us to play around in the space, and that maybe that, you know, becomes the site of the kind of public part of this, but maybe it's just like a container for notes alongside our kind of text notes. If you can send me your latitude and longitude, I'll kind of spatialize our relationship and see, like I might be able to even pull that data. I know that we were working with oh my God. Wafa Bilal, sorry. All I can think of was Wali Beshti, the WD. Wafa Bilal, I don't know if you know his work, but he did a project. He's a Iranian artist located, I think, in Chicago, but he did a piece where he sat in a gallery and had a paintball gun that was controlled via a web portal, and people could log in and, like, you know, aim the paintball gun at like him and like shoot. And he lived there for like 30 days, you know. It's like yeah. So he did a project with us, and we used New Art City. He wants to launch a small sculpture of Saddam Hussein's bust into space, because Saddam Hussein was like put his scientists on this challenge, like how to launch a gold bust. He wanted it to be a gold bust, like of him like floating in space, orbiting. And so Waleed is trying to recreate that. So we've been working with NASA, like, and like, you know, like they kind of like they're like, maybe, yeah, like let's talk about this. But then we might be using like a you know, a private satellite, like low orbit satellite launching company. But we did a mock-up of it in New York City.
Oh yeah.
And I think that they used, or at least we're investigating using, like live geo data from somewhere, I don't know, and importing that. So I'll check in with them. So we might be able to have some sort of live communication with, like, anyway, I'll check. I'm not sure exactly how.
Yeah. That's nice. Okay. I just check if I wanted to.
Or maybe it's the latitude and longitude of the final exhibition would be. But for now, whatever.
Be a thing, you mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for now, let's just use like where, like your studio, my studio, and then.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Do you know how you can find like really precise informations about latitude and longitude?
Yeah,
like,
if you
Google Maps, or
yeah, you can do it in Google Maps. If you, let me share my screen. So like I'll do, and then if you click on the, come on. Oh, right click, it'll just show.
Right click, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. You know, and the, like, just thinking about signal too, like the
the culturally significant thing would be like the address, the post, like the address that I would give to the post office, right? But then the globally significant sample is this latitude and longitude, even though it's like the same place, right? Like there's like protocol or text or language that different systems would use.
And then it's again, it's connected to this Julius von Bismarck installation with the pecan extracted from the ocean and exhibited, but an object that you ask to play again the movements, you know. I think
right, like a sampled movement from its experience.
Yeah.
Or like from conditions.
Exactly. So now we have both locations on the Google Sheet. Great.
Thank you. All right, so I'll start playing around with this and see what happens, and then you'll get an invitation from me.
Yeah.
Say like New Art City Run is inviting you to. I can do that now, actually.
Okay, great. And then cool. And did you like we have to sign the contract?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you receive the mail?
I did receive it, and then I was going to do it, but then it wanted, I forget what it wanted, but like a little bit more information or something, and so I put it on hold.
Yeah. Yeah, the same.
Yeah, it's been a busy.
Yeah.
I have this spare room. What is that? Maybe we can use this.
And I mean, the location in San Francisco is still open, right?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah, you.
Who is this? Well, I don't want to.
Because how is the area of Swissnex in San Francisco?
It's very like it's a very like touristy district, and there's like a big kind of art, like science museum across the way, but it's right on the water, right? So it looks kind of back towards towards Oakland, but also towards I guess the closer direction towards you.
So it's kind of overused location. I mean, if you want to make like an art installation, it's like you have to ask to dozens of people and have authorizations and blah blah blah.
Yeah, so I think it's technically the port authority that runs the, so anything that gets permanently installed, or you have to end up getting permission from like the Parks and Recreation Department in San Francisco and this kind of port authority. I know folks who have had, I actually did a public install. It was on private property, but it was like adjacent and visible, so it had to get run through those channels, and it wasn't.
Okay.
But I mean, I think, if David's interested in how, I don't want to overstep, but I'm happy to help find locations. I just don't know,
Yeah.
So
this is another job. I mean, this is a job. Yeah. Do you know the other?
And if it's a, if it's going to be a problem to have like a permanent physical thing here, like, then I would say let's forget that. I mean, if we're using kind of a surrogate space, and then if you have a space available to, you know, like it doesn't have to be, again, symmetrical. I think that, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. It can be part of the concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course.
Cool.
Nice. Let's work on this platform.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of stuff in there. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
Yeah, this was also crazy these last weeks with this kind of barrier, you know, like this kind of jet stream. I discovered the jet stream thing with I mean, was it hot in Auckland or the warmth?
So we are in a microclimate, like I went to San Francisco during the day to a friend's place and they had the heat on. So it stays really cold, but everywhere else, like around here it's
crazy.
Yeah. And you know, by the time this thing goes live in October, we will probably be in, you know, like fire.
Yeah, because
who knows, you know, like, you know, last time these things happened, everything shut down, you know, public,
of course,
all public places shut down. So
that's
another
crazy because here it's the total contrary, you know. It's July, it's supposed to be the like the summer, and it's raining all day, it's cold, everything is just closed. It was crazy when I discovered that the two things were connected. You know?
Oh, right.
Like, oh, it's so hot in Canada, and then I read that actually it's connected. You know, I mean,
right. That usually the cool that would be dumped here is now getting dumped on you, right?
Yeah, exactly. But the jet stream is like moving in a way that things, are just separated. But that's crazy.
I'm reading or just finished Kim Stanley Robinson, who wrote the Mars trilogy. I don't know if you're into sci-fi at all, but he wrote a new book called Ministry of the Future for the Future. And it takes place, you know, and it's like a very global situation there, but like kind of the key players are in Switzerland, where this like newly formed kind of post-Paris, you know, agreement ministry is located. And then there's also like, you know, a San Francisco component, right? So I think
the ministry is located in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you just write the reference?
I mean, it's not a real thing. It's his book. You know? It's science fiction, but you know, I like some of the things that you're talking about, like what is kind of Switzerland's, you know, like export, right? And like, you know, here, like I know Switzerland for like watches and for kind of like their what would it be, like a neutrality, like a space of like supposed neutrality for like international disagreement or something, or agreement, you know.
Yeah, and also like some cheesy things like
like Heidi, or not Heidi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and all this Indian Bollywood industry that comes in Switzerland just to use it as a set, you know. So we are kind of watching American content, and Indian industry is coming to use Switzerland as a set. And I mean, this is really strange, you know, because you don't, people use Switzerland, but Switzerland is consuming totally external contents because we don't produce a lot of things. That's interesting. I mean, we could produce things with the mountains and everything, but actually we are not interested by. So foreign people are interested by and use it for their own industry.
But it's like that retinal, like the visual experience, right? The extraction of the visual experience. Yeah.
But you do not consume it as a Swiss people, you know. You have to,
but only through the lens of the kind of external, like it's kind of like the porn thing, right? Like you only see it through somebody else's kind of fantasy
exactly.
of the thing. Yeah.
We only see that the country is beautiful when we welcome like foreigners or like friends that live in other countries, and they say like, wow, this is so beautiful. And at the moment, you know, you discover that your own country is beautiful, but otherwise, no, not really.
Right.
Yeah, the experience of the beauty of the country is not like so powerful, you know, not with the external people.
Right.
Or Switzerland, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, you know, same in the Bay Area, right? Like, you know, I can go to the beach. I can go to the mountain, like within an hour, right? Like I can go to the mountains. I can go inland, and it's kind of like very dry, almost like kind of like deserty. You know, like so many different, and then I can go into these like massive redwood forests, right? That are like totally mystical. And I stay in my studio, you know, like I don't see it unless somebody comes to visit, and I'm like, oh, let me show you all of these, which is also kind of an interesting. I mean, it's that feature, and you know, what parts of the protocol become normalized, right? Because you have to focus on performance of certain activities, which kind of preclude the specificity of location or something.
Yeah.
Well, I've got another meeting in 5 minutes, but this is awesome. Like,
yeah, that's perfect.
If we just end up, so I had an artist friend who was given similarly, like, you know, $2,000 to do a project, and you know, like he was like collaborating with like a couple other artists, and they were like, you know, kept like discussing the thing, and then the project became, they went to dinner, a fancy dinner, and it was like 5 of them, and they used the entire $2,000 like on the dinner, but then also recorded the conversation, and so then the project became this dinner. Even if it, you know, if these conversations are the thing, right? Which I'd be thrilled with.
Exactly. Yeah. When I talk again, I just met David on the street last weekend, and he said again that the documentation of the conversation are really important, and it's almost more important than the work, you know, the final piece, if there is a final piece. They are really interested in the interactions between the two artists, and I like it.
That's great. So I'll make sure to like set up the auto record so we don't have to futz around with that on the Zoom. So we'll also get a text, and once it's, you know, processed, I'll link that in the Google Doc.
The Google sheet. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Cool. All right. It was so good to again, congratulations, and it was so good
Thank
to
you.
catch up. And we'll connect for our next meeting. Figure out when that is.
Okay. Great. Have
Bye.
a nice day. Bye-bye.